Today we're going to start learning about fraction division, and we have two targets on this. They really kind of blur together, so we're going to kind of take a look at both of them at the same time. Our targets say that, get my highlighter here, target 1 wants us to solve word problems involving division of fractions using a model. The only difference between that and target 2 is that we are solving it mathematically. You see, it's still word problems, it's still division of fractions, but we are looking at the math. The models are kind of tricky. We really need to be able to recognize them. And so we're going to concentrate on just working with word problems and then understanding fraction division. Let's start with vocabulary. We have numerator. Some of these you probably already know. The number of parts that we have, it's the top number. So if I said I ate 2/5 of a pizza, I know I ate 2 pieces of the pizza, and the denominator is telling me the total number. So then that would mean that the pizza was cut into a total of 5 pieces. A few things we need to remember. If we have a whole number, we can turn it into a fraction by writing it over the number 1. And this is going to be important because you're going to need to be able to write those as a fraction when we start dividing. Also, we need to remember, we did this in intervention, that we can take a number like this, which is called an improper fraction. I know it's an improper fraction because the top number is larger than the bottom number. I can divide and turn that into a mixed number, which has a whole number and a fraction. We also practiced going backwards and turning a mixed number into an improper fraction by doing the backwards C, which is 3 times 2 plus 1. Now, we can practice just that again if we need to. You're going to need to be able to do that in order to be successful at dividing fractions when there are mixed numbers. Let's continue on with our level 2 words. Of course, we have a fraction. Building our vocabulary. What we need to know is that we can flip it upside down, and it's called the reciprocal. You might need to say that a couple of times to yourself. Reciprocal, reciprocal, reciprocal. You're going to hear that a lot. If you'll notice, as I said, the numbers are just flipped around. Now, the fancy definition of reciprocal, see, I can't say it anymore. The fancy definition of reciprocal means that when you multiply the reciprocal by any fraction, you're going to get the number 1. Now let's test this. If I take 2 times 3, that equals 6. If I take 3 times 2, that equals 6. 6 divided by 6, remember the fraction bar, can mean division. 6 divided by 6 equals 1. Now you can test that with a lot of fractions if you want to, but we need to understand that anytime that you multiply it by its reciprocal, you're going to get 1. That's kind of a mathematical rule that comes in handy later on when you're working with algebra and different things in high school. So it's good to kind of remember that word reciprocal. As you can see here, just kind of a fun way to remember is you flip it upside down. Not literally, because then the numbers are backwards, but their position. What used to be the numerator is the denominator. What used to be the denominator is now the numerator. Let's take a look at our strategy for dividing fractions. Now, this would be target 2 because it's the math. Okay, we're not really looking at the models just yet. We're looking at just the math. So you're going to keep the first fraction. So do you notice that 1/4 is the same in both places? What's here is here. You keep it the same. The difference might be if you had a whole number, you would need to write it over 1. Or if you had a mixed number, you would have to turn it into an improper fraction in order for it to be just in fraction form. We'll get to that in more detail as we get those kind of problems. We change next division to multiply. And when we do that, it's very, very important. We have to introduce that reciprocal. We have to flip the fraction. Do you notice the 5 was in the numerator? Now it's in the denominator. The 4 was in the denominator, and now it's the numerator. This is where you can start to multiply across. 1 times 4 is 4, and 4 times 5 is 20. Now you might notice that they have 1/5. I'm going to show you a trick. I have a 4 down here and a 4 up here. They're in opposite positions. One's in the top of the fraction, one's in the bottom of the fraction. That means I can divide those or cancel before I multiply. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So then I have 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 5 is 5. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with that, you don't have to worry about it. It's going to make your high school career in algebra much easier. You can also look at the answer that I first got, 4/20. I can tell by looking at 4 and 20 that I could divide a 4 out of both of those and simplify the fraction to 1/5. Either way, I'm going to get the same simplified answer. Okay, notice here we labeled that flipped fraction with the reciprocal. Let's take a look at how we would model this with a picture. First of all, the problem that we are working is 1/5 divided into 3. So you'll notice that our first picture has one whole entire rectangle, and it is cut up into 1/5 sections. So there's 5 total sections. They're all the same size. See, we don't want to have to draw them because it's really hard to cut stuff up evenly. One of them is colored in because we have 1/5. Okay, now we have to divide that 1/5 into 3. So if you'll notice, if I draw a line down here, do you see what happened? They cut that 1/5 into 3 places. They had to repeat that with each 1/5. Okay, because we got to know like what fraction of the whole entire thing is that. So now I can count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That tells me that each piece is 1/5. Or I'm sorry, 1/15. So if I wanted to, I could label all those 1/15. Okay? So when I take 1/5 divided by 3, cutting it up into 3 pieces, I'm left with 1/5. Now we can check this with our keep, change, flip. We're going to keep, change division to multiplication, and we're going to flip 3 as a fraction. Well, you might say, Mrs. Canupp, 3 isn't a fraction, it's just a whole number. Remember in the beginning, we put it over 1, so then I'm going to flip it, use the reciprocal. 1 times 1 is 1, and 5 times 3 is 15. Did we get the same answer? Yes. So anytime you see a model question, you should be able to check yourself with the math, just in case, because sometimes the models can be confusing. Let's try another one. Divide, use the models to help you. We have 1 divided by 1/5. So we have the 1 total is gray. Then we've cut it up into 5 pieces. Okay, those would signify dividing it into 1/5. So we have to cut it into 5 equal pieces. So how many pieces are we going to have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can we check that with keep, change, flip? Well, 1 as a fraction would be 1 over 1. Change divide to multiply. Flip or write the reciprocal of 1/5, so it would be 1 over or 5 over 1. Then multiply. 1 times 5 and 1 times 1. That's going to be 5 over 1, which simplifies to 5. We got the same answer. Nice job. Next up, use the model to help you find 8/14 divided by 8. Now, I'm going to guess by looking at all these little boxes, they've taken 1 and cut it up into 14 pieces, but I'm going to count to just make sure. That would be 1/14. That would be 1/14. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you see how 8 of them are colored in because we're taking 8/14 and we're cutting it into 8 groups. Okay, so there's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So the whole entire model is one thing cut into 14 pieces. Now, I'm going to change colors here because we have to divide it into 8. Well, if I make groups of 8, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, this doesn't count because I only had 8/14. So I made 8 groups there. I divided 8/14 into 8 groups. And what's inside each group? Well, I can see it right inside there. It's a 1/14. Let's check ourselves with the math. We leave the first fraction the same. Change division to multiply. Flip the second fraction. Well, it's a whole number, so I wrote it over 1. Now I'm going to take and flip it. Now, I have an 8 up here and an 8 down here, so I'm going to cancel those. I'm basically dividing each one by 8. You can do that only when one's in the top and one's in the bottom. So 8 divided by 8 is 1. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. 14 times 1 is 14. Voila. Okay. Now, just checking to see where I am. We're going to throw in and start going to the level 3 because now we are looking at word problems. Okay, are we ready for word problems? I hope so. Let's take a look at this one here. Actually, I'm going to take a pause here because I want you guys to just do the level 2 check-in, and then we will pick up with the word problems on our level 3 in the next video. Good luck.